Welcome to another episode from Virtualize Everything, where we strive to inform and educate the viewer about technology and technology-related topics. Today's video presentation is going to be about installing Raspberry Pi OS in a Proxmox VM. I love this operating system, even in an x86 environment, because it was designed to be fairly lightweight. So when running it in a VM, it's fast and responsive, just like a bare metal OS traditionally is. So here we go. Let's install Raspberry Pi Desktop OS in a Proxmox VM. The first step is going to be to visit raspberrypi.org. Click on the Software tab, and then click on the Raspberry Pi Desktop link here with the arrow pointing to it. Now it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. Notice the giant download button. We're going to click on that button and download the copy of Raspberry Pi Desktop OS. Now that the copy is downloaded, let's head over to our Proxmox web interface. We're going to click on our drive that contains our ISOs on the left-hand side. This drive, traditionally, by default, is called local. Now we want to select ISO images and click Upload. Once you click Upload, this screen will appear. We're going to click on Select File and navigate our browser window to our Raspberry Pi desktop image wherever we downloaded it to. Once that's selected, you will see the fake path appear in the content window, just as it is here. To finish the process of uploading the ISO, we're just going to click on Upload, and the ISO will upload in a little bit over a minute in most cases, depending on your network speed and your connection quality. Now it's time to create a VM. To do that, we're going to click Create VM in the upper right-hand corner. The window that you see in front of you in the center of this screen will appear at that point. You're going to want to fill in the VM ID and the name. Now, the VM ID will automatically fill in chronological order for the systems you have. But I have a little bit different of an organization system because I make a lot of templates. So I'm going to use the number 350 today. Use whichever number you want. Feel free to keep them in chronological order if that's how you would like. It's totally up to you. Now you want to enter what you want to call this VM. Today I'm going to call it Raspberry Pi OS. The last step is going to be to click Next. After clicking Next, we're going to move on to the OS element. This is where you're going to select the x86 ISO of your Raspberry Pi OS here in this drop-down box. Now, after selecting that, we're going to click Next and move on to System. Our system today is just going to be left to defaults, so we're just going to click Next. After clicking Next, we're going to move on to the hard drive configuration. This is where you select where you want to store the image. In my case, I'm going to store it in the local LVM volume. This may differ depending on your system configurations, but this is where I am going to install it. Feel free to change this to where you want with your Proxmox configuration. Now, enter your drive size. Today, I'm going to use 32 gigs. I believe you can use as small as 8 gigs for this image, so feel free to configure this as you desire. Click Next, to move on to the CPU configuration. Here is the CPU configuration. We're going to enter the number of cores for this operating system. This operating system is designed on a Debian kernel, and with most CPUs being at least dual core these days, I suggest you give this at least 2 cores to operate on, but it is a very nice, lightweight operating system and performs fairly well even on 1 core. Go ahead and enter that number and click Next to move on. We're going to enter the RAM size. I have entered 2 gigs here. You can give this as much RAM as you need or as little as you desire. I would suggest using at least 2 gigs, but you can use less if you desire. Now we're going to click Next to move on to network configuration. And with this network configuration, we're just going to use defaults, as all we really need from our network adapter is the ability to communicate with local systems and internet. We do not need secondary ports or ability to isolate this network port on Open vSwitch. So we're just going to leave this configuration as default and click Next to move on. This window just asks us to confirm our settings that we configured throughout the system. Go ahead and check to make sure your settings are configured correctly and click Finish to finish up this screen. Now we're going to start the VM and we're going to click Console. After starting the VM and clicking Console, a screen will appear that looks just like this. Use your arrow keys to navigate down to the graphical installer and press Enter to begin the installation process. The installation process will move on to the first screen asking you to configure your keyboard layout. The default keyboard layout will be British English. So you'll need to go ahead and configure a United States English keyboard if you're in the United States. After you configure the correct keyboard, click Continue to move on. Now you're going to begin the installation process. This screen will take a few moments and load the needed components from the image to install. Depending on your drive speed, this should happen fairly quickly. Now, we're going to be asked to configure our drive. We have a few different options here, but today, for a default install, we're going to go ahead and configure the entire drive as one drive for this installation. To do this, we leave our default highlighted entire disk install and press Continue to move to the next screen. Now, we're just going to hit Continue again to configure this entire drive for installation. Again, we're using a default setup, so we're just going to use the recommended option for new users. Click Continue. Now, we're just going to click Continue here to move on. This would be the screen, if you so desired, that would allow you to create multiple partitions inside of one drive. But since we're going to leave this drive alone as one giant partition, we're going to just click Continue. Now, to write these changes to our disk and to configure it correctly for installation, we're going to check Yes if it is not already configured and press Continue. Your installation process will begin. This should take 5 to 10 minutes on average to configure. Obviously, if your system has more resources and more power, this will go quicker. Drive speed is also a huge limiting factor, so if you're running on an SSD or NVMe, this will also happen much faster. After your installation process has completed, we're going to go ahead and load the GRUB or GRUB bootloader. This is the standard bootloader that most Linux operating systems use. This bootloader is going to be loaded by checking yes and then pressing continue to move to the next screen. We're going to go ahead and select the dev/SDA drive, the only drive that this system has, and click continue. Now it's going to give us a warning message to make sure that we indeed want to finish the installation by installing the boot sector on this drive. Go ahead, click continue, and move on. After we do that, the system's going to go ahead and restart, and you are going to be presented with this screen. Press enter, and your operating system will boot. On the first boot of our Raspberry Pi desktop OS, we're going to be presented with this welcome screen. This welcome screen will help us configure the basic settings for our system. We're going to go ahead and click next, and then we're going to fill out our country of origin, the country you are in, your correct language, and your correct time zone. This is also a point to tell it which keyboard you plan on using, and once you have done that, you can click next. Now, here is time to enter the password for the default user Pi. Now, this was a quick tutorial installation, so I just quickly set a password. I would suggest that the password you choose be at least 8 characters, but as you can see, my small, short password did indeed work. But please, don't use a small short password if you plan on using this system for more than a test configuration for a few minutes. It creates great vulnerabilities for your operating system, for your files, and for your network. So, make a decent password, please. Now it's time to click next and do our software upgrade. I clicked skip because I wanted to show you how to do a software upgrade on the command line for later on. But in your case, you're going to click next, and then you're going to be presented with this screen. Just click done. Now, I have clicked on the terminal here, which opens a terminal window, and then I have entered the command sudo apt upgrade and sudo apt upgrade y. If you notice, I entered full dash upgrade in the command prompt. This is due to it being an initial installation, and I wanted to make sure all packages were installed. Most of the time, the command shown here in front of you in red will be fine. If a new version of Raspberry Pi Desktop OS comes out, you're going to want to use the full upgrade instead to upgrade your operating system. When that happens, I will put out a video showing you just how to do this process. Please stay tuned for that point. I hope you enjoyed the presentation from Virtualize Everything on installing Raspberry Pi Desktop OS in a Proxmox VM, and that you enjoy using this super lightweight, responsive operating system for many different tasks on your home lab server. As always, like, share, and subscribe. All of these subscriptions help Virtualize Everything bring you better content and support the Linux community and home lab users in their continuing education and growth. Have a good night.